I'm really excited to do this show because this is a brand new Cathouse Hollywood podcast. The Cathouse has been spoken about a lot lately, which is really cool because the club opened 38 years ago and closed 32 years ago. Even though there was a nice piece recently about the Cathouse on the Nothing But a Good Time doc, there hasn't really been a show or a podcast that really talked about what the club was like when you would walk inside it for the first time, especially during that first year of 1986. This show will do just that. And it's kind of cool story how this whole podcast was recorded. You may have heard of a place or not called Eagle Pass, Texas. They had a bad tornado in 2007. Eagle Pass has gotten in trouble with the government, but in the past years, it's sort of been in the limelight because it's the focus of the illegal immigrants crossing the border because most of them are crossing across the Rio Grande, which is in Eagle Pass. So it's got that going for it. Would you believe October 26th in Eagle Pass, it's Riki Rachtman Day. You see, a guy named Will Shannon owns a bar called Cooters. It's a little bar right in the middle of Eagle Pass. Fun bar, good staff, good food. Also a bar you don't want to talk shit in, if you know what I mean. So Will's brought a bunch of bands down there. I know he's brought Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, Black Flag. And on one particular evening, I went to hang out in Eagle Pass and see my friends in the band, JUNKYARD. JUNKYARD is one of those bands that I believe sound as current today as they did when they were on MTV. They had a semi-hit called Hollywood. Remember, that's life in Hollywood. You wonder why I never made it as a singer. There's a bunch of songs from JUNKYARD, and JUNKYARD ended up going out on tour with a lot of bands from Guns N' Roses. I once saw him even open up for Leonard Skinner. JUNKYARD was also the first band I ever interviewed on MTV in 1989. One night, late 2019, I sat backstage with JUNKYARD. Okay, it was actually a room behind the bar surrounded by beer kegs. I was at Eagle Pass at Cooters. JUNKYARD have always been Cathouse regulars since the very first day. They even went to Cathouse, Arizona with us. I like everybody in that band. We sat down in the backstage / room storage facility beer closet, and I had a recorder with me, and I turned it on, and we reminisced about great stories about the Cathouse. The stories that you haven't heard about. What was it really like going to the Cathouse? Jane's Addiction, Black Crows. So many stories in this episode, and it's a blast. And this is why this episode was really fun. All I did was turn the mic on and let everybody talk. There was no script, no editing. What do these stories sound like? Well, I think these stories sound like episode 9 of the Cathouse Hollywood podcast. Coming to you from the Cathouse South Studios in Race City, USA. This is episode 9 of the Cathouse Hollywood podcast, and I am Riki Rachtman. Did you know that the Cathouse Hollywood podcast is brought to you by CathouseHollywood.com? That is a place, my friend, that you can get Cathouse shirts and Headbangers Ball shirts and Cathouse Coffee, OFITG, high-quality merch, totally authentic. You can find all that stuff and much more at CathouseHollywood.com. That's CathouseHollywood.com. And yes, I, Riki Rachtman, now have a Patreon, which is my name. And that Patreon will give you extended versions of this podcast and podcasts you've never heard, videos, and so much more. But right now, let's get back to Eagle Pass, Texas, shall we? Not coming to you from the Cathouse South Studio in Race City, USA. We are coming to you from, of all places, what are you guys making weird faces at each other? Introduce yourself, first of all, and introduce yourselves and describe the place that we're sitting at right now.
Right now, we're in Mexico.
Everyone introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Todd from JUNKYARD, and we're kind of by Mexico somewhere.
And I'm Pat from JUNKYARD, and we are in Mexico. We're actually not in Mexico. This is Tim from Junkyard. We're in, is this the kitchen or is this like the storage room of a club in Eagle Rock, Texas? There's stacks of water and like the unused promotion for Red Bull and things like stacked in the corner.
It's a gold mine. If you look over there, that's a gold mine.
I'm sorry. This is Backstage, and there are a lot of girls, and it's awesome.
My, how much things have changed. This is how much things. We're here, by the way, with the guys from Junkyard, which, incidentally, Pat Muzinga started on the very first Cathouse Hollywood podcast when I had no idea what this show was going to be. It was 11 minutes long.
Little did we know.
Pat's part on the first podcast was to talk about when Black Crowes played the Cathouse. The whole podcast was 11 minutes. I never knew that the show would end up being an hour and a half. But what happened is, as happens so many times, a bunch of old friends like ourselves get together, and we're just talking backstage here in Eagle Pass, Texas. And I'm like, I got to bring the mics out here, and we got to talk about Cathouse stories, because you guys were all around from the early days. You guys have all been around. Now, do you guys go to the Oscos, Cathouse, the first? And if so, what do you remember about Oscos?
This Todd, I remember walking into the place, and the first thing that struck me was the talent. Seriously, the talent was incredible. Talent was incredible. Goddamn microphones are fucking. I'm getting microphones. The girls there were insane. And the soundtrack was really fucking great. When I walked in, I think it was a Bowie song. I said, this is the place to be.
This is Pat. The Oscos. So basically, you walked in. It was like, you walk in, great music was playing. There was chicks walking around with masking tape over their fucking nipples. But then it reminded me of like a punk rock Scarface, I guess, with all the mirrors and everything. And then the best.
Was good. But that is a good definition of Oscos, a punk rock Scarface.
And then the best thing was like all of a sudden you'd like these cool songs are playing, and then you see like people that you would normally hang out with, they start dancing and stuff, and that's really embarrassing because they're dancing.
Because there was no
awful.
rock and roll dance clubs then.
They're like, hey, I'm dancing to Love and Rockets, but it looked like they're having an epileptic seizure or something.
Tim? Did you go to the Oscars ever?
I went to the Oscars. When I first got off the bus, just like Welcome to the Jungle video, and I literally got off the boat, and I think I went to Cathouse because I saw a flyer at like Let It Rock, and it was at Oscars. Well, we were young gentlemen, and we were chasing a certain thing all the time. But you did walk in and go, because Joseph, the DJ, you'd walk in and just you couldn't believe that someone had it kind of sussed, like figured out like, oh, you can play AC/DC, the Sex Pistols, you can do this, all this weird things that we all loved. It kind of was like, oh shit, like the dots connected. Like there's no problem with playing Toys in the Attic and Submission back to back.
Right.
That had never happened. Like now it's okay to be a punker, and like Metallica will say we love the Misfits and all this stuff, but back then it was like there was lines about all that shit. The ice machine is making ice as we speak. Literally, it's churning it out. Let me get the way. Honey, the ice is ready. It's ready. Get the bucket. Okay. Thank you. But that was a real revelatory thing about Cathouse, is that it was the first guy who kind of codified the cross-pollination of us punker kids kind of morphing back into the rock that we love, that we came up from. And you kind of thought that you were alone a little bit. Like, and then you go there and like, oh, I love those two Aerosmith records. You know what I mean? Like there's these things that you love to that thing, but how do I put that into my like, but I'm also a Minor Threat kid. You know, how does that happen?
It would be like AC/DC, and then you would hear Flesh for Lulu or Bauhaus. And
the goth thing was key too.
Well,
goth.
Yeah.
It was that intermingling of like, I mean, the Cult was a big bridge band because they kind of touched on a lot of this stuff.
Right.
But the fact that there was a little bit of that goth, that was a thing, and we all love goth chicks.
Oh,
I think there was that too.
That too. But it also was at a time before, like, it was at a time before Hollywood wasn't so separated, where it was like, well, you're signed and you're signed and you're signed, and you got the ego.
No one had record deals.
No one
yet.
had record deals back then.
If they did, they were just like getting records going.
It was just handing out flyers, and it was like everybody could hang. It was like.
The plus part about it wasn't like going to Gazzari's or like a Sunset Strip kind of place. It was just like a little bit more sleazier, you know.
I have to be honest. I like the fact there wasn't bands. You know what I mean? I'm in a band and all that stuff, but like, I like being able to go out and listen to music and not have to hear a fucking band. You know, I wanted to go around people who were like-minded and girls. And when it started being bands, that was also too cool because you got such high quality. And by then, a lot of those bands were actually kind of famous. So that was also weird because, like, the guys who were standing at the bar a year earlier were just some guys standing at a fucking bar. Mm-hmm. And they were all going like, oh, I forgot how much I loved that weird song off Toys in the Attic. And you kind of a jibe on that, or you play Torn and Frayed from Exile, like weird shit. But then, like, there was no band to have to sit through.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, if you think about it, like, how many people that went there early on and how many bands actually stemmed from hanging out in that time. Because, you know, back then, a lot of people were coming in from out of town. You know, the whole punk rock scene had pretty much died. So it was like a cross breed of, like, people from Godzilla. The key
is that you know, Group House, Crash on Floor, touring punk guys, they were a lot of the glue of it, too, whether it was with Duff from the Farts, through Brian from Minor Threat, and you and D. Cry and Gates from Big Boys. Like, all those guys slept on floors at Disgraceland with the connection back to Tex and the Horseheads. That stuff was important because it built those relationships that when guys like that, we could land here and go, hey, I'm from D.C., like, oh, okay. And then there was a connection. Yeah, there was a whole, like, the Hangman guys I met very early here, and they were all just kind of guys who would come up sleeping on couches like the rest of us.
But, and they would also, everybody would hook up, and then it's like, oh, we're playing a show. Oh, we'll get you on. But, you know, everybody shared their connections back then.
The punk ethic, the way of supporting other bands kind of held through even to what was called glam, though no one called it that then.
No, I don't know. It was I guess it was glam. It was kind of glam.
Well, no, what happened was that even though a lot of the influences were coming from T-Rex, and we all loved Hanoi Rocks at the time. We all loved Hanoi. But what was happening is that somebody was calling the bands like the Poisons that were really the first of that wave to get signed.
Yeah.
They were calling them glam, and that really wasn't part of the Cathouse thing.
It was more
Poison
street.
was not a Cathouse band.
It was like a street thing more.
Like,
that was like a term that was sort of invented to try and put a line basically at Crescent Heights, as we used to call are you east of Crescent Heights or you west? And that's a little inside baseball about this, but like they were trying to find a way to say like they're not playing Gazzari's, but they are a rock band that has guitar solos and have long hair. What is that called? So if you said glam, people just went Gazzari's.
Yeah.
But none of us, we never went there.
No,
we never did any of those things. We wouldn't even go near it. But so street and maybe
street
sleaze,
and people
maybe?
used to call it gutter. It was like gutter rock.
I always liked it called Gypsy Junkies.
Yeah,
I think it looked like the
basically
Gypsy Junkie looks. That's what it looked. Do you remember? And since we're kind of talking about the old days, do you remember walking into Osco's? Do you remember the stairway walking up?
God, yes. I took my time because there was chicks at the top of the stairs, so I just took my sweet time, you know, walking up and.
But the stairways were dangerous because you would fall through.
Yeah.
You could fall through.
I would bounce off them every time it was just like bumper cars. It was very narrow.
Yes.
Dangerous, but it was narrow. So you just lean to the left, lean to the right, stand up, sit down, fight.
So who were some of the bands that you remember that you would see there on a regular basis at Osco's before we had live bands?
Oh, God. Yeah. I would say, like,
it's just like
Scott from the Joneses, pretty much.
Scott
you
from
know,
the Joneses.
I didn't know that, like, Billy Gibbons went to the one at Osco's. I had no idea that, but I know Steven Tyler went there. Of course, the guys in Motley.
Todd Crew.
Right.
Just a mess in the corner. Izzy.
Todd Crew. Well, okay, let's talk about this. The guys that you think were more than, every single Tuesday, and I can't believe we're doing the Cathouse Hollywood podcast with Milli Vanilli in the background right now. Who would be the two drunkest people at the Cathouse every Tuesday? Because I think
Todd Crew
and Wes Arkeen?
Yeah.
I would say Slash.
Yeah. I don't.
Slash fell down the stairs holding a plastic plant, wearing a Cathouse security shirt. That day I really remember.
I will say this. people seem to imbibe more back in those days in general. I mean, like, it's like throwing. I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but we all enjoyed ourselves, and it seemed like it was totally acceptable culture. I mean,
this was pre-Uber.
And we drove. We actually, once we were
Yeah.
done, I think it had something to do with the white powder afterwards.
All I know is that I had to pay like employees like sometimes $60 cash at the end of the night that I was so fucked up I couldn't literally count out 320s. And I used to have to tell all the people that worked for me they'd have to come to my apartment the next morning because I physically couldn't count out three $20 bills.
It was fucking crazy, man. It was so fucking fun.
So then the first night that we ever had a band play, which we've referenced many times on this podcast, is the Christmas party, which was also the record release party for Guns N' Roses, like a Suicide EP. And that night, do you remember that night at all?
I missed that night.
I wasn't there.
I
didn't make that night.
I wasn't
no.
either.
Okay, well, all of a sudden, things started changing. Bands started getting signed. Who do you remember being the first of our Cathouse wave to get signed?
My first recollection when I got off the boat, this is a bill, and I tell people I saw this bill. It was 86, and I guess G&R had just gotten signed, and it was a show at UCLA. So this is fall of 86. So I'm a little bit of a late rival. And the opening band was Thelonious Monster. The next band on was this band called Guns N' Roses. The next band was the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the headliner was the Dickies. And then I saw Axl Rose for the first time, and he came out in Assless Chaps.
Was that Santa Monica Cinema?
No, it was some cafeteria at Royce Hall at UCLA. And we were so, like, we had just, we had no way to compartmentalize how different they were. And the way we knew they were going to be huge is my buddy Davey brought a chick, and she was like running backstage to meet Axl Rose. Literally dumped him there to go and try and climb over the barrier to meet Axl Rose in his Assless Chaps. I'm like, and I just
Like nothing to do with the headliner with Leonard from the Dickies.
It's not going to happen for Leonard. I hate to tell him, but I just remember we both looked at her like each other and go like, "Wow, shit's changing." Like, and we and
Could you really tell at that point, seeing Guns N' Roses?
yes,
Yeah,
Things were
yes,
gonna really-
yeah.
because I
Right from the get-go.
dropped in right when they were ascending, so I was a pretty clean slate, and I'd been in bands and all the other back in DC, and I'd come out here, and I saw this, and I saw that with other bands that went on. I mean, Red Chili Peppers, and arguably probably sold more records, or maybe as many, and I had just already seen them. And Thelonious Monster was this kind of what they called college rock then, and the Dickies were a OG punk band. That's what I was there to see. And just to see this dropped in the middle of that, you knew that was a sea, at least to me, that this is a sea change band. And I remember looking at Izzy Stradlin going like, oh my God, this guy is a fucking rock. I had never had that kind of moment. And I'd seen Minor Threat. I'd seen a lot of amazing bands. Replacements very early. And I thought Paul Westbrook was a genius very early, but I hadn't seen a band that I looked at. Because I looked at the place and go like, they're incredible. They'll sell 10 records, but I'll buy them all. Yeah. And I saw Guns N' Roses. I'm like, this band literally could be as big as the Rolling Stones. Partially because they have that guy who actually is as cool as Keith Richards. Yeah. And the singer is like some, weird thing. And like that's always going to work. And I saw the chick standing next to me going like, oh, my God, what is this? I'm like, oh, boy. And we just looked at each other like, we're way behind. Yeah. And I knew, and so maybe that's a pretty good reference because I was a pretty clean slate. I didn't know them as a bunch of guys jobbing around like you guys did. I just saw them as this thing, as a fully formed thing, and I think they welcomed the jungle or something, and I was like, what is this? And it was a game changer.
Not what you would normally think of it as a Cathouse band, but still wrapped them in that era, and somebody that we played quite a bit at the Cathouse, and they hung out there. Did you sort of get the same type of feeling when the first time you ever saw Jane's Addiction? I
thought they were another band that I was just like, I saw them very early too. I think I saw them Scream.
That when Jane's Addiction started coming up, that was another thing that everybody was talking about them.
It's really interesting because there would be bills where Guns N' Roses and Jane's Addiction would be basically on the same bill or on the same thing. And why one became like alternative and one became metal, I have no idea, because at the time all that was intermingled. I always thought James was kind of this Led Zeppelinized goth thing almost. Am I crazy?
They were kind of confusing.
But
the first time I saw him was Raji's. And I was just like, Raji's sound was terrible. But Perry showed up when he had like his weird like
he had his echoplex
echoplex
that he
and all
would
that
run.
shit.
Yeah,
and I was like looking at him, I'm like, all
That's
right, this is
interesting.
like, are we going backwards? Like going back to like experimental flipper type shit?
My thought about them initially, really, the first time was like they got a great drummer and a great bass player, and if you got that, they had a great groove.
Right,
I didn't really understand what they're doing on
I
top
had
because
no
it was
idea.
pretty new.
Yeah.
But I said, well, it's got a really good groove, and everyone is like bobbing and dancing,
Yeah.
and they're just a local band, and people are freaking.
Yeah.
And once again, every girl I was trying to pull
Right,
was always
right.
going like, oh, I fucking love James, and Jane's this,
Yeah.
and Jane's. I'm like, yeah, I love him too. But I thought my first thought was like, the singer's nuts. I'm like, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
And they had a great rhythm section. Not unlike Guns N' Roses. At the time, that was a great rhythm section. Duff and Adler, they were funky. They had such a cool groove. And, those things are always hold up, I think.
Yeah.
And that was my reaction to Jane's
Yeah,
initially.
James. I mean, when I saw him at Raji's, the sound was terrible. And then I think the next time I saw him was Jesus. It was at maybe the Roxy or something like that, and it was amazing. And then the next time I saw him was when Junkyard opened up for him, and that's when Jeff's band it was Green River. It was Green River's last show with Jeff and Stone from Pearl Jam. So I remember walking into soundcheck, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Junkyard's got a good gig with Jane's Addiction, but their soundcheck was all long, and I was just like watching them, trying to figure out again what the fuck is going on. And they finally jumped into a song, and then I was like, all right, there's something going on here. This is weird, but this is going to be like really big weird. And then they kind of like figured out when they got in the studio, they like nipped and tucked all the songs. And then it was like first time I heard the fucking first song off the album was like, oh fuck, this is ridiculous. This is so good.
Around 1986, 87, everybody in our circle started getting record deals.
Yeah.
Guns N'
Yeah.
Roses were getting record deals, and then you mentioned the bands, and it's like the Faster Pussycat, L.A. Guns, Jet Boy,
Yep.
and you guys,
Yeah.
and Junkyard. Junkyard, if you were to name the Cathouse bands, even though at first you weren't really a Cathouse band,
No, not
so
at
to
first,
speak.
yeah.
But you became a Cathouse
But we were there
band. You
every
still are.
time.
You're on my fucking podcast 30 years later,
Yeah, I
okay?
know,
You're
huh?
a Cathouse band now. What was it like then? It must have been pretty weird to be caught up in all that because it's like
whole getting
all of a
signed
sudden
thing?
everybody
Yeah.
had to become businessmen pretty much, right?
No, it was Well, the thing is, with all these other bands, it seemed like everybody, just made the cardinal mistake. They took all their money, they got signed, and they thought more money was coming in, and they took their advance and they went out and bought some huge, expensive car. And all of us in Junkyard, it was a little different because we came from booking our own tours in punk rock, putting out our own records, or dealing with like not janky small labels, but dealing with small labels. So we kind of already went in with a business sense. So we knew how much it was going to cost to go on the road, but we really, once we got the actual invoice or looked at it, I didn't realize it was going to be that much money. But so we kind of were a little different. We knew how to handle our advance, so we took our advance and talked to a business manager and said, how long can we make all of this last by paying ourselves a salary? And our salary back then was $800 a month. That doesn't cover rent or anything like that. That's $800. So basically your rent's going to be $275, $375. You don't have a lot left over. And then, we all were smart and we had health insurance. So that's another $125. So by the end of it, we were basically at your club every night.
Let's bring it back to the club, and I will ask you this, and let's answer honestly now. Did any of you ever have sex in the cat house?
No, in the cat house?
Yes.
No.
You have to think?
No.
Todd?
I gotta admit, I got it touched.
What was that?
I got it touched.
You got.
That's all I'm gonna say.
You got it
Somebody
touched?
touched the damn thing?
Someone touched the damn thing.
How did it? Tell me where this happened. Not on
It
your
was in the
body. Where?
bathroom. Of course. Where else is it gonna happen?
Highland
Yes,
Scream.
Highland Scream. Not
More.
Oscars.
A lot
Yes.
of a lot of people seem to
At
have
the
had.
Probe,
A lot of people seem to have had more notorious action at Bordello. Well, we'll talk
Okay,
about.
you didn't say anything about
Okay, we're
Bordello.
gonna
That's
talk
a little
about,
different.
We're going to talk about Bordello in a little bit. We're going to
Yes.
talk a little bit.
What are you saying,
Now, I
man?
think the one thing that really solidified Junkyard and Cathouse as becoming a family is when we did take Junkyard to
Oh my
Cathouse, Arizona.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
Cathouse, Arizona.
Tim was there.
Nothing. Cathouse, Arizona was how do I explain it? Cathouse was at its peak.
Yeah.
It was huge. I decided to do the Cathouse Arizona.
Uh-huh.
Take our club to the. It was decadent. Tell me about Cathouse Arizona.
I wasn't a member of Junkyard yet. I was just a hanger on, and so Brian Baker had the great idea, like, we'll take Tim as a guitar tech. Worst idea ever. I'm the worst guitar tech. I'm the worst guitar player. Imagine me as a guitar tech. So we do the show, and by then I'm stiff as a new broom before they even go on. Just rocked, and the plane ride was like, like out of a Fellini movie. It was insane.
And the biggest troublemaker, I don't know if you remember this. Do you know who was the biggest troublemaker that got us in the most trouble at Cathouse Arizona?
Troy?
No, not Troy. Maybe he wasn't that one. Shannon Hoon.
Oh.
Was he not there? Shannon Hoon. Yes, Shannon Hoon I had hired
That's
as
right.
as the van shuttle driver because he worked for Rachtman Entertainment, and he almost got everybody arrested. But what do you remember about?
This is my favorite memory. After I was basically passed out backstage, and Gates and Baker look at me like, "Where's my tuned guitar?" I'm like, "What?" And they're just like, "Oh, Mosier," and they just like, "Oh," they're so angry at me. So we get back to the hotel, whatever it was, and Arizona's like everything's like on a golf course, right? And I think you went on up front at the end of the show. It's like, "Hey, we're staying at the whatever the Ramada." Exemplar or whatever nonsense it was, and everyone came. Everyone came.
This club was fucking huge.
Oh, it was easy 1,000 people. So it was one of those places where there was like kind of like a court.
What happened is people like, I know a lot of people were from Arizona, but there were a lot of people from Hollywood, and we felt like we're all going to go to fucking Arizona, and we're going to be bad.
Yeah.
We're going to be bad. It's like recess. It's spring break for a bunch of degenerate rockers that we're going to go to Arizona. So we all went there, and then we got all of Arizona, and they wanted to play Hollywood. They wanted to be decadent and rock stars like we do in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
And so then we tell everybody to go back to the hotel.
So there's this courtyard. So like two wings of this hotel, like kind of a grassy courtyard in the middle, and there's a couple hundred people there, guys, gals, lots of people.
All the doors are open.
All the doors, everyone has their hotel doors open. Do you remember this? I think Troy did this, and I'm standing there, and there's lots of beautiful, sexy girls, and there was probably a dozen Cathouse guys really that came in, and Troy just stands up and goes, "Everyone who's with Cathouse can stay. Every guy has to leave. Girls can stay." And he threw out all of the guys, and was like 50 girls and us 12 Cathouse guys. And suffice it to say, it was an interesting evening. But I just remember seeing this, and the guys were like, "What?" And they're like, "All of you," and because you had like the colors on, they were like intimidating enough that they actually did it. And like this parade of like guys. Probably some left girlfriends there. I have no idea.
Probably. Yeah.
And it was like, and so it was like the 12 guys from Cathouse who were there to be with Yard, whatever, and like 50 girls in this hotel thing. And then it gets a little blurry, and I'm not going to get into all that.
And then all of a sudden, doors would shut randomly.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, doors started shutting a lot quicker. And that is a true story. And I remember going like, "Whoa."
Perhaps I should have told you when we started episode 9 that what you're going to get is about half of the show. But if you are a Patreon subscriber, you will get the whole Cathouse Hollywood podcast. There are also podcasts that will only be on Patreon. And you can hear the rest of this Cathouse Hollywood podcast and get videos and merchandise and so much more for as little as $2.22 a month. Come on, $25 a year. You're going to get all these podcasts and stuff like that. And get this one, the whole podcast, which is really good. Again, my Patreon is patreon.com, Riki Rachtman. Patreon is spelled Patreon. I hope you did enjoy what you did here, because I really had a blast on this podcast, and I hope to see all of you on my Patreon. I'm Riki Rachtman. Remember to keep one foot in the gutter, one fist in the gold.